Hello everyone, welcome to Foundations of Photography, Lesson 5. Now previously we went and covered camera controls, including ISO, um, depth of field, and shutter speed. Today we're going to cover lenses and the types of lenses and the focal lengths and how those focal lengths impact your photography. So first, what is a focal length? So on a lens, camera lens, the focal length is the distance from the center of the optical system to the plane of the image sensor or film. So basically, on top of a lot of cameras, you'll see a little line through a small circle, which represents the focal plane of that camera. And so this measurement is from the optical plane of the lens from the center to the plane in the camera when the lens is focused at infinity. So when you have a 50 millimeter lens focused to infinity, that's 50 millimeters from the center of the optics to the sensor. That's how they define a 50 millimeter lens. So what kind of lenses are there? We have ultra wide lenses, wide angle lenses, you have standard lenses, you have short telephoto lenses, and you have telephoto lenses. Now, right now, what we're talking about are all considered prime lenses. And a prime lens means it's a single focal length lens. It doesn't operate at different millimeters. That optical distance is always the same. So an ultra wide lens is normally 10 to 24 millimeters, and the use cases for that are it gives you an expansive field of view, which is normally great for landscapes and architecture. You do have to be careful with it because at that short of a focal distance, you typically get some distortions. Then you have wide angle lenses. Now, normal wide angle lens is going to be 24 to 35 millimeters. Now, you can still get distortion in those lenses. Some of it depends on the lens quality. But those lenses provide a good natural context for your photography. They're also good for street photography and travel photography. Then you have your standard focal length, which is going to be your 35 to 50 millimeter range. Now, the reason this is called the standard or the normal focal length is these focal lengths, the 35 to 50, probably the 42 millimeters, the closest to what your eye can see. So these are normally your general walk around lens, and they normally give good renderings of the stuff that you see. Then you have your short telephotos. Those are 75 millimeters to 105 millimeters, which are great for portrait range and flattening the compression of your image. Then you have strong telephoto lenses, which are 135 millimeters and longer. And these are great for sports and wildlife because of compression, they magnify the object in the distance and bring it to as if you're looking at it much closer. So, and you know, referring back to astronomy days, you know, the lenses give you your magnification capabilities. So your standard lens is going to basically be almost a 1-for-1. Your short telephotos are going to be like a 1.5-ish. And when you start getting into your telephoto longer lenses, 135 millimeter and longer, then you're going to get you know your 2x, 3x, 4x magnification and a much narrower field of view. So you know the long telephotos are going to be your selection of lenses for sports and wildlife. Now, this is pretty much everything on a full frame camera. On APS-C, there's a crop factor, which on APS-C is 1.5. So a 24 millimeter lens on APS-C is actually going to perform like a 36 millimeter lens or a normal focal length lens. 50 millimeters will become a 75 millimeter. 75 millimeter is going to be in the range of 105-ish. 115 millimeter. That's how the performance in focal distance works. Now, the F performance of the lens doesn't really change when you go from full frame to APS-C. So that's really good. And for reference, which probably nobody shooting medium format will need to be told this, but for new photographers, in medium format terms, the crop factor is kind of a reverse. So an 80 millimeter medium format lens will actually optically perform as a 64 millimeter lens. 65 millimeter medium format lens will perform like a 52 millimeter lens at full frame. So that's generally the bulk of lenses and focal lengths and kind of how they work. Now, you know, here is a good example, my Fuji X-H1 camera. I have a Yashica f1.7 50 millimeter lens mounted here. So this is the normal focal length. But it's going to act a little bit like a baby telephoto lens because it's an APS-C camera. So my 50 millimeters is now going to act like a 75 millimeter f1.7. And this is a great lens for portraits and still general shooting. But I've got a little bit narrower field of view than the traditional 50 millimeter focal length. So that's one impact. So things to remember, your distance from subject also matters and comes into play. When I was talking about the distortion for the ultra wide and the wide angle lenses, the closer you are to subjects, the more impact that has, potentially. The further away, the less impact. And that was a good example of that was the first set of pictures that I took of the patio sofa. You know, when I took pictures of that using that same camera and lens, changing the f-stop didn't really have any impact on the background or the blur of the background because I was further away from the piece of furniture than that lens could really take advantage of. Now, last week I took a picture of a plant in my backyard. I was 3 feet away from my subject, and you could see the difference in the background blur. So you have to consider your distance from the target of your photography and your focal length and that combination to determine what kind of background you're going to get in your image. So I hope this helps, to take it a little bit further. And the reason you'll hear photographers talk about shooting portraits at 75 millimeters, 105 millimeters, and producing good results in those focal ranges is because you're going to get better background blur out of longer focal lengths, to a point. But it also matters how far you are away from your target. Now, 75 is also great, and 105 is even better if you are not a person who likes to get close to your subjects. So if you're shooting out on the street, normally you would shoot a 28 or 35 millimeter focal length, sometimes 24. Typically if you're doing a street portrait, you want to be kind of close to your subject. But if you're an introverted type person, you might consider putting a 75 millimeter lens on there and shooting your street portraits using that lens, because you don't have to get as close and you're going to get very nice results out of that. So I hope you like this lesson. If you do, please hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.